Imagine waking up a piece of hardware that's been, just collecting dust in a closet for like 6 years. You power it on and you're just crossing your fingers that this total relic can somehow save a modern business from complete destruction.
Right. I mean, you're stepping into a diagnostic landscape where the X-ray machine is broken, the patient is actively crashing, and the paramedics just have absolutely no medical history to work with.
Yeah, totally. Welcome to today's deep dive, everyone. We're tearing into a real-world incident report today from an IT and cybersecurity company called Cowabunga Computers.
Yeah, and our mission for you today is to really deconstruct this absolute cybersecurity nightmare. It's a ransomware attack on a veterinary practice.
Right, we're going to trace how just a series of, seemingly small compounding digital failures pushed this thriving business right to the brink. And I mean, what it actually took to pull them back from the edge.
And I'll say, it is pretty rare we get this level of visibility.
Oh, absolutely.
Because typically, forensic IT investigations, they're locked behind strict NDAs and insurance claims. But here, we're getting an unfiltered look at the anatomy of a disaster.
Which is awesome for us.
Right, it gives us this unique opportunity to strip away the jargon and just examine the high-stakes reality of network vulnerabilities.
Because the mechanics of this failure, I mean, they apply to almost any modern organization out there.
Exactly. So to set the stage for you listening, it's the morning of Tuesday, July 28th, 2026.
Right.
Picture this really busy veterinary practice. The waiting room is loud, the phones are ringing, staff are, balancing clipboards while trying to check patients in, and then they hit a wall.
Yeah, suddenly they can't access their critical practice management system.
Right, it's a software called AviMark.
And faced with a system glitch, they try the universal first step of all IT troubleshooting, right? They reboot the server.
Obviously, turn it off and back on.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
the machine powers down, it boots back up, but nothing resolves. The database is still totally inaccessible. And that's the moment, right? That is when a staff member notices this text file just sitting on a workstation desktop, a ransomware note.
And panic just takes over. I mean, the report outlines how the staff literally started scrambling to unplug computers and, medical equipment directly from the network.
Yeah, they were physically yanking Ethernet cables out of the wall sockets just to stop the spread.
Which, to be fair, physical isolation is actually a highly effective instinct when malicious encryption is actively moving across a network.
Like, it stops the bleeding.
Exactly. It stops the bleeding. But in that moment of complete operational paralysis, they pick up the phone and they call Cowabunga Computers for emergency assistance.
And I want to make a critical distinction for you here because I think it frames the entire investigation. Cowabunga Computers was not this veterinary clinic's existing IT provider.
No, they were completely unaffiliated.
Right. Cowabunga did not build this network. They didn't manage it. They had no monitoring tools installed. They didn't secure it prior to the attack at all.
Right, they were walking into this environment entirely blind.
So to use kind of a medical analogy, it's like ignoring your health for a decade, suffering a massive heart attack, and then expecting the paramedics who show up in the ambulance to have already fixed your diet, right? Like, Cowabunga is just the ambulance crew in this scenario.
Yeah, I would actually push that analogy even further.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's more like paramedics showing up to a building collapse where they don't even have the architectural blueprints.
Wow. Yeah, that's terrifying.
Right. Their sole objective in that initial hour is just to contain the damage, put out the active fires, and, attempt to salvage whatever infrastructure hasn't already been turned to ash.
Right. And once the cables are pulled and the bleeding stops, unplugging everything doesn't actually tell Cowabunga how the attackers bypassed the perimeter in the first place.
Exactly. They have to start digging through the wreckage.
And when they look at the network's configuration, I mean, they find an environment just riddled with massive holes.
The list of security gaps they discovered is it's staggering. I mean, at the center of this veterinary practice was a primary server running Windows Server 2008.
Wait, in 2026, running Windows Server 2008 is essentially relying on a prehistoric artifact.
Yeah, it's ancient.
Microsoft stopped providing standard security updates for that operating system, over 6 years ago?
Exactly. It is entirely unpatched against modern exploits.
Right.
But having an unsupported operating system is dangerous enough, right? But this specific server was exposed directly to the open internet.
Oh, man.
Via Remote Desktop Protocol, or RDP.
And for those listening who don't know, RDP is a technology that gives a user full graphical control of a machine from afar, right?
Yep. And if you leave it exposed without, a virtual private network or a firewall restricting access, Literally anyone in the world can just ping that IP address and be greeted by a login screen.
And they didn't just expose the main server either. Like, the forensic report noted several individual Windows 10 workstations were also facing the internet.
Right, on alternate RDP ports.
Specifically, I think it was ports 3390 and 3391.
Yeah, and that's just security through obscurity, which is a failed strategy.
Just hoping hackers won't check alternate port numbers.
Right, but automated scanners find those open doors in literally seconds.
Wow.
But the fatal blow, the real fatal blow, was the credential management. Cowabunga found a shared workstation account on the network, literally just named user.
Okay, I read through that section of the report several times to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding it. The password for that account was only 3 characters long.
Yeah, 3 characters.
Like, in a modern computing environment, I didn't even think Windows would allow a password that short without throwing an error and, like, forcing a complexity requirement.
Well, by default, modern systems do require complexity.
Right.
But whoever originally configured this network actively went into the group policy settings and relaxed those rules.
You're kidding.
No, they removed the requirements for special characters, numbers, or length. And crucially, they also failed to implement an account lockout policy.
Okay, so a 3-character password facing the open internet with no lockouts. Isn't that the digital equivalent of putting a cheap luggage padlock on a bank vault and just letting a burglar guess the combination 40,000 times without ever sounding an alarm?
I mean, a luggage padlock implies a physical limitation to how fast someone can try different combinations.
Fair point.
This is a digital padlock. Hackers use automated botnets that can guess thousands of passwords a minute. And you actually hit the exact number found in the logs there.
Wait, really?
Yeah, Cowabunga's investigation uncovered roughly 40,000 failed login attempts over the 2 weeks leading up to the ransomware deployment.
40,000 failed attempts, and nobody at the clinic had any idea it was happening.
Nobody. They had no mechanisms in place to notice. The practice totally lacked an enterprise endpoint detection and a response system, an EDR.
Right.
They had no advanced intrusion detection firewall. There was just no centralized security monitoring alerting anyone to the brute force attack.
So for 14 days, a script just hammered that server until it finally hit the 3-character combination.
Exactly.
Okay, so the moment that script guesses the password, the lock clicks and they have access. So if we move from the vulnerabilities to the actual footprint of the attackers, what happens next? Because they didn't just immediately deploy the ransomware, right?
No. Attackers rarely encrypt immediately upon entry. Cowabunga found specific artifacts left behind in the administrator profile, including a network scanning utility.
So they break through the front door and immediately pull out a scanner to map the building.
Exactly. They're looking to see what other servers, databases, or workstations are connected to the environment.
Oh, wow.
And then they start manipulating the environment using legitimate administrative tools.
Yeah.
Cowabunga found malicious PowerShell scripts.
And PowerShell is it's a powerful task automation framework built into Windows, right?
Right. And cybersecurity analysts refer to this tactic as living off the land.
Ah, okay.
Instead of downloading custom malware that a basic antivirus might catch, the attackers just hijack the system's own built-in tools to do their dirty work.
Which totally explains why basic antivirus wouldn't flag it. The system thinks it's just executing standard administrative commands.
Precisely. They use these PowerShell scripts to enable remote desktop on other machines internally, which creates backup backdoors for themselves.
Sneaky.
Very. And they also deployed scripts designed to actively disable Microsoft Defender, stripping away the network's remaining rudimentary antivirus protections.
When cybersecurity professionals talk about the kill chain, the step-by-step path an attacker takes to compromise a system, this feels like a textbook example.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, gain initial access, map the network, weaken the defenses, establish persistence, and move laterally.
Lateral movement is really the critical phase.
Sure.
Once they own one machine, they use it as a pivot point to compromise the rest of the network before triggering the encryption payload.
So when we talk about lateral movement, I want to clarify the mechanics for you listening. Does that mean the attackers essentially use the company's own internal hallways to quietly walk around and unlock every single office door from the inside before detonating the ransomware?
It's close.
Oh.
But to be technically accurate, they didn't just steal the master keys to walk the hallways.
Okay.
By disabling Defender and hijacking PowerShell, they essentially altered the building's blueprints. So the security system thought they were the legitimate building managers.
Wow.
Yeah, they didn't just have access to the rooms. They owned the infrastructure of the building itself. By the time they triggered the encryption, They had complete control.
Now, I know the Cowabunga report included a major caveat about this initial attack vector, focusing on the difference between forensic inference and hard evidence.
Yes, and this is a vital lesson in incident response. The report heavily infers that the exposed RDP port and the weak 3-character password were the initial access point.
Right.
Mechanically, it is the most logical conclusion. However, they cannot prove it with absolute certainty.
Because there's no historical logging to actually prove it.
Exactly. Without historical logs, investigators do not have a definitive video recording of the break-in.
Right, right.
They just have the broken glass near the window and muddy footprints in the hallway. They can confidently deduce what happened, but it is technically circumstantial.
Man, that's frustrating. Okay, so the attack is complete. The veterinary practice is entirely locked out of their systems. Patients are literally in the waiting room, and the business is effectively paralyzed.
Yeah, it's a nightmare.
We have to look at how Cowabunga Computers actually puts this network back together. Because based on the lack of monitoring you just mentioned, they're working with almost no resources.
Yeah, we are entering the Frankenstein recovery phase.
Frankenstein recovery, I love that.
Well, the immediate priority in any ransomware event is locating viable backups. But in this case, the situation was dire. There were no general infrastructure backups whatsoever.
Wait, a modern medical practice with absolutely no backups of their primary server configuration or network drives?
None. And unfortunately, it's remarkably common in unmanaged environments.
That's insane.
The user profiles, the map drives, the permissions, all destroyed.
So what did they do?
The sole saving grace, the only thing keeping this clinic from total bankruptcy, was that their AviMark practice management software utilized a specific independent cloud backup service called Data Vault.
Oh, thank goodness.
Right. That service successfully protected the veterinary patient records. But everything else in the local network evaporated.
Okay, so Cowabunga steps into this smoldering environment to begin triage. What's step one?
They executed a rapid containment strategy. They kept all systems physically disconnected. They instantly reset the compromised shared workstation passwords and all domain administrator credentials.
Okay, locking the doors.
Exactly. Then they replaced the basic routing hardware with a proper unified firewall to heavily restrict network traffic, and they deployed an enterprise tool called Huntress.
I want to pause on Huntress for a second. That's an endpoint detection and response tool, or EDR, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So how does that differ from the basic antivirus the clinic originally had?
Basic antivirus relies on signatures. It basically compares files against a known list of bad viruses. If it hasn't seen the virus before, it just lets it through.
Which isn't great.
Not at all. But EDR platforms like Huntress monitor behavioral anomalies. Even if an attacker is using a legitimate tool like PowerShell, the EDR recognizes that a PowerShell script attempting to disable security protocols or encrypt massive volumes of files is malicious behavior.
And it catches it.
Right. And it instantly isolates the machine.
Okay, so they use Huntress to hunt down the remaining malware. And for the workstations that are deeply compromised, they completely wipe the hard drives and re-image them.
Yep.
But I think the wildest detail in this entire report is how they tackled the Active Directory recovery. Because the main server, the brain of the network, is completely encrypted and dead.
Right. To rebuild the Active Directory domain, the Cowabunga technicians had to get incredibly creative.
What did they do?
They scoured the physical office and dug out a retired domain controller, a server that had been powered off and sitting in a closet for 6 years.
Hold on. They saved this modern business by waking up a 6-year-old digital ghost.
They did.
That's like finding a dusty, ancient map in the attic to rebuild a modern city. How does that even function in a modern network?
Well, poorly at first. It creates a massive synchronization nightmare, specifically regarding Active Directory trust issues.
Right.
Because Active Directory isn't just a list of usernames. It's a complex cryptographic ecosystem. Every single computer joined to a domain has its own hidden machine account. And those computer accounts automatically roll their passwords every 30 days to maintain a secure trust relationship with the domain controller.
Okay, so if this server has been powered down in a closet for over 2,000 days.
It is entirely out of sync. It is expecting cryptographic handshakes from 2020.
Oh, wow.
So the modern computers currently sitting on the network look at this resurrected server and essentially say, your security ticket is expired, we do not recognize you, and they just refuse to communicate.
Makes sense.
Furthermore, Active Directory has a mechanism called a tombstone lifetime. It's a set period after which old, disconnected records are permanently marked for deletion. Bringing a 6-year-old server back online violates basically all of those built-in security thresholds.
So they can't just plug it in and hit the power button?
Not even close. The technicians had to manually visit every single workstation, unjoin it from the broken domain, and forcefully rejoin it to this resurrected server just to establish new trust relationships.
That sounds exhausting.
It was. And then because they had no infrastructure backups, they had to manually recreate every single group policy by hand.
Rebuilding group policies from scratch. I mean, we're talking about manually mapping network drives, configuring network printer connections, redeploying desktop shortcuts for the Avimark software, and resetting all basic user permissions.
It is grueling, tedious engineering work. But against all odds, they actually managed to restore the Avimark database via the cloud backup, stabilize that 2020 domain controller, and get the business operational again.
It's just a miraculous recovery. But it leaves this lingering, terrifying unknown hanging over the business, doesn't it?
It does. The absolute hardest question an investigator faces after a ransomware event is determining data exfiltration. Was sensitive information stolen before the files were locked?
Right, because we're talking about client names, addresses, payment histories, employee records. Did Cowabunga figure out if the attackers actually stole data?
They could neither confirm nor deny if data was exfiltrated.
Really?
Yeah, because the practice lacked firewall logging and endpoint detection prior to the attack, they were completely blind.
So you're telling me it is entirely possible that gigabytes of sensitive data were packaged up and sold on the dark web, and because they didn't have basic logging, this business will literally never know for sure?
Yes. To frame it with an analogy, imagine a commercial airliner crashing, and investigators arrive at the scene only to discover the airline never bothered to install a flight data recorder to save a few bucks.
Wow.
You have the wreckage, you know the plane crashed, but you have zero telemetry. Cybersecurity monitoring isn't just about stopping the bad guys at the gate. It acts as your black box. If an attacker breaches the network, you need logs proving exactly what files they touched and what traffic left the building.
That is so important. Now, the report does mention that law enforcement, specifically the FBI and the Honolulu Police Department, became involved in the aftermath. And they attributed the attack to a specific variant called Moonlight Ransomware.
Right, law enforcement tracks global threat intelligence and ransomware syndicates. However, Cowabunga Computers clearly stated in their report that they did not independently verify this attribution.
Because that wasn't their job.
Exactly. Their scope was emergency incident response and recovery, not international threat actor profiling.
Right. So taking a step back from this specific clinic, we really need to extract the core lesson for you, the listener. We've covered the vulnerabilities, the attacker's methodology, the lack of backups, and that grueling recovery process.
I think the definitive takeaway here is that ransomware disasters are rarely caused by a single, isolated failure. They are the result of a systemic collapse of layered security. Relying on an unpatched server, open internet ports, and a 3-character password is not an IT strategy. It is a reliance on pure luck.
There is just a massive operational contrast here between what Cowabunga provided during this incident and what a business should proactively maintain.
Absolutely. We really have to contrast emergency IT recovery with managed IT and cybersecurity services. Cowabunga acted as a trauma surgeon, saving a patient who was flatlining on the table. Managed services are designed to manage the patient's health so the trauma never actually occurs.
So it sounds like relying on emergency IT is like buying fire insurance, whereas managed IT is installing smoke detectors, automated sprinkler systems, and doing regular fire drills. One pays out when the ashes settle, and the other keeps the building standing.
That's spot on. A managed service provider enforces the rules. They ensure continuous patch management so you aren't running server 2008 in 2026. They provide 247 endpoint monitoring. They manage firewalls, enforce identity security with mandatory multi-factor authentication, and configure strict password policies so a 3-character password is just physically impossible to create.
Because they actually review the logs to catch a brute force attack on day 1, not day 14.
Exactly. And crucially, they manage the backup architecture.
Right, because the phrase "we have backups" is a dangerous myth if those backups aren't architected correctly. You need layered redundancy. local copies for rapid restoration, off-site copies for physical disasters, and immutable backups.
Yeah, and that last part is key.
Can you explain the mechanics of an immutable backup for everyone listening? Because I know that is the true failsafe against ransomware.
Sure, immutable means the data cannot be changed, deleted, or encrypted for a designated period of time, even by a system administrator.
Oh, wow. Even an admin.
Yep. If a hacker gains full domain admin privileges and attempts to wipe your backup repositories, the storage system itself simply refuses the command. The data is locked in a read-only state.
That's brilliant.
It is. Combine that with regular tested recovery drills, and you totally neutralize the attacker's leverage.
The overarching truth here is that the best ransomware recovery is the recovery you never have to perform.
Exactly.
No software and no service provider can guarantee 100% safety because threat actors are constantly evolving. The strategic goal is to dramatically reduce your attack surface, ensure you can detect an intrusion instantly, contain it before lateral movement occurs, and recover your data without paying a ransom.
Absolutely.
I want to turn this directly over to you listening. Ask yourself a hard mechanical question today. If an automated script started hammering your network tonight while you were sleeping, would your systems flag the behavior?
And if you walked into the office tomorrow to find ransom notes on every workstation, could you restore your entire infrastructure from immutable backups by the afternoon?
Because if you hesitate on either of those questions, you are metaphorically operating with a 3-character password on an open internet port.
It's a sobering reality check.
It really is. I want to leave you with one final thought to chew on as we wrap up this deep dive. We heavily associate cybersecurity with this arms race of cutting-edge software. We talk about AI-driven threat hunting, zero-trust architecture, and quantum encryption. But in this specific incident, the entire business was salvaged by a dusty, forgotten piece of hardware that had been asleep in a closet for 6 years.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, in our relentless rush to constantly upgrade, hyperconnect, and digitize every facet of our operations, have we prematurely discarded the simple offline fail-safes?
That's a great question.
When the modern digital grid fails and the automated tools are locked down, sometimes the only thing capable of pulling you out of the wreckage is the oldest, most disconnected tool in the building. So take a hard look at your infrastructure this week and figure out what your ultimate unplugged backup plan really is. Thank you for joining this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.